Manufacturing and industrial environments provide their own unique challenges for wireless communications. Harsh conditions, both indoors and out, create a daunting task for engineers to work through. This is where we come to discuss those challenges, share ideas, and help one another out. My name is Scott McNeil, and welcome to the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop. I am Scott McNeil. My co-host, Jeremy Baker, is here. Say hi, Jeremy.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
We are back for another episode, and we have got a lot of stuff to talk about this go round. There has been a lot going on in the wireless universe for industrial and manufacturing and ride safety and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. There's a lot to discuss this go round. I want to touch on some Wi-Fi 7 stuff as well. But interestingly enough, the past few months, there have been a few major CVEs come out. I don't know if you saw this or not, Jeremy. A fairly big one with Cisco curb radios that would allow for access via HTTP with full, if I read it correctly, with full admin credentials, which will allow full control of the radio. According to the CVEs that I was reading, there's no workaround for it. That the only fix is to either upgrade the iOS firmware version or to completely disable the curb functionality, which kind of defeats the purpose of a curb radio.
Yeah, that sounds suboptimal.
But I thought I hadn't seen any sort of big vulnerabilities like that come along in a while, and especially let alone for a heavy duty Cisco radio that is used everywhere. Now, it did say it specifically affected three different models. That was the IW 9165D, the 9165E rugged, and the 9167E heavy duty. I'm glad I ran across this because I actually have a deployment coming up of the 9165D. So the very first thing I'm going to do when I get them is upgrade their firmware so I can
Yep.
just completely avoid what could possibly be a disaster should someone realize, what radios were in place and the vulnerabilities they've got.
Yeah, we've got some of those out in the wild too. So that's a little concerning, but everything should be patched, or up to date firmware on everything that we've got.
So according to what I've been reading, users who are on 17.14 and earlier are recommended to migrate to the fixed release, which is 17.15.1. And if anybody's into CVE tracking, this is CVE-2024-20418. And this does have a CVS score of 10. That makes it a pretty big deal. So if you have these radios out there or know someone who does, tell them to get them patched because that's a pretty severe CVE. While I
Yeah, let's
was, searching and just kind of doing some research, Nozomi Network Labs, they discovered a CVE or a vulnerability in an Advantech radio as well. What is the model? The EKI 6333AC2G. It is an industrial grade wireless access point, and it apparently has significant risks on it for and up to and including remote code execution with root privileges. So that is bad. There's several models that are affected, and people are encouraged to upgrade their firmware accordingly. And when I was reading through some of the access modes for this, it's one of them is pretty brutal. It's you don't have to be connected. You just have to be within range, wireless range of it, and have the radio identified, and then can capture the beacon frames apparently, and then spoof them on a Rogue AP. And then once you have access, then for the most part, you have free reign on the device. It does say for some of these to actually take full effect, the attacker must also have administrator user access for the Wi-Fi analyzer section of their web application. But they do state that that's fairly easy to get through phishing and other social engineering campaigns. That's awesome.
Or the or
So,
you know the post-it note in the control cabinet.
or the post-it note, and it's not only post-it notes. I see like laminated signs in control cabinets with all manner of information. But you know what they say, if you carry clipboard and act like you're supposed to be there, no one's going to question you, right?
Yep, that's right. Just put on your high vis and look like you're making notes.
That's those are some pretty heavy duty CVEs.
Yeah, that's it's kind of scary. But I mean, that's systems in general. Like, I mean, there's probably 20 of them that are 20 of similar issues that are sitting there that somebody just has to figure out the mechanism to get to it. But just being near the radio or the device, that's kind of scary because
That is
it's
kind of scary. Fortunately, with the Cisco, with the Curb radios, they actually discovered that in their own internal testing. So,
mhm.
as to the best of their knowledge, to the best of their knowledge, it never made it out to the wild as far as being publicly known. And so they've been able to issue the patch before it became like an official 0 day, which good on Cisco for catching that with their own internal testing.
Yeah, and I think this is we should come back to this when we kind of just generally talk about curb later on.
Well, I mean, let's go ahead and talk about Curb.
Okay. Well, so one of the things that came about is there was just that mobility field day 12. And so one of the things, so kind of, as you're talking about this, like one of the things that kind of clicked for me was that they announced that Wi-Fi and curb are going to be able to operate simultaneously. And so not just that being there, some of the support is based on the new hardware is going to have that capability, but it's also going to be in, like the radios can be controlled by the WLC, the wireless LAN controller. So if you're using a local controller or FlexConnect, you'll be able to have this stuff running kind of on the same radio. So with that stuff being there, that's capable on those 9167s, 9165s. So then if it's got a vulnerability like that, is there something where, somebody can get onto they're aware of that being there because of the wireless network, um, scanning it with their phone or something.
So did they say that you would actually be able to control the Curb functionality via the wireless controller?
I think like the management of it is what it would be because you still need I don't imagine that's a good question, but I don't know that the wireless LAN controller would be able to function as what's called the mesh end in that system, and that's that MPLS kind of traffic cop
Right,
that
right, right, right.
dictates the communication stuff. So they didn't really go into like how that would be handled, but I imagine when the documentation and stuff comes out, but it's probably still going to need one of those. And so I don't know if that becomes like a VM you host on the network or if it's still like a dedicated piece of hardware. Like in some instances, like you'd use a 9167 and just disable the radios and have that function as a mesh in for a system.
Yeah, I have questions, and I think we need to get somebody from Cisco on the show that can answer them because this is pretty important, especially with as prevalent as these radios are, as they take over all the roles that Fluid Mesh previously had, and Fluid Mesh was or is and was the major player in ports all over the world,
Yeah.
among other things, as well as high speed rail. So, yeah, we need to get someone on from Cisco slash Curb so that he can answer our questions. I mean, because that's a lot to unpack there when you think about it. Because that's a just a metric crap ton of functionality on one access point. Especially if you're, it's one thing I can see where you can run it in each mode, but not at the same time. But simultaneously, that's got to eat up some resources. So what are you packing hardware wise into that radio?
Yeah, that I could see that. I could see that too. And so usually it's like one of the things they refer to it as is like as it exists now in at least those 9160 series radios is that you can dual boot it. So you can either have, an 802.11 based, a Wi-Fi radio, or you can boot it into curb mode. And so it's and so the typical thing is you might put like a curb radio as your backhaul, and then at one of your nodes, then you have a second, either a switch or you just piggyback into it. And then you have a wireless access point kind of hanging off of that in sort of like a daisy chain or whatever. And then that becomes your like local WLAN for that area. But and that's one of the things they were saying was that, it's going to remove the need for, the guy said, remove the need for a parallel infrastructure. And so in the notes you see, I said, is this a headache? And I think it's going to be a definite yes. And if it's just security related, then that's kind of scary because a lot of times when we deploy it, the intention is for it to be air gapped or to remove the ability for like IT to be
Right.
able to go in
It is to
and
be
push.
completely segmented off of corporate. It's its own entity. And so doing this, how complicated does it make it in a universe where most OT guys don't have the expertise to really support that, right? From a day-to-day standpoint. And like you said, it's a segmented portion of the industrial universe. We don't want it reporting out to the known universe. We don't want that opened up. We control all that traffic from OT, and we try to keep it dedicated and deterministic within our bounds, right? And your typical OT guy, they're usually a controls guy who happened to have learned some networking along the way, and that's what got them thrown into that role. And so they're expected to kind of learn a little bit of everything. And will this make it just overly complicated for those guys? Well, I mean, I guess that's why you and I exist, is because a lot of that stuff is overly complicated for them for everything they have to support, right?
Yeah, but and I think too, not to like poo-poo it or just be completely negative about it. I think it also is going to open up some really fascinating things too, where it's like, does the customer choose to say, hey, I've got, I'm imagining an instance where it's like, okay, well, we can provide coverage in an area, and if we can get if we've got a access point that has two radios in it or three radios, can we provide some wireless coverage for the tablets and stuff like that? And I could still see it sort of being air gapped or whatever nomenclature you want to use for that, but then still also kind of providing that both flavors of wireless connectivity in the area. So you've got your low latency required controls traffic, but then you've also got you need somebody to be able to be in the area and program or download to a PLC or something. So I think it's going to be ultimately a net positive. I think it's just sounds like there's going to be some headaches for the people that live with it day to day while they kind of sort through all those little problems.
I concur. There's going to be some headaches, and there's going to be a fair amount of foul language. Do I think long term it's a good idea? I do. Removing the parallel infrastructure removes a lot of the cost, which allows OT to concentrate on other, secure aspects of infrastructure that they're traditionally kind of short on. So yeah, I do think it's a good thing long term, but as with anything, it's going to be growing pains, I guess.
Yeah, and I
And
don't know that
again,
it.
I've got questions. We got to get somebody on.
Yeah, well, I will. I got a note. I'll reach out to some people. Maybe we can both reach out to our people we know and get a couple of people on. So what next?
What else we got going on? You have some
Hmm.
notes in here about drones. Everybody loves drones.
Yeah, so this was just kind of like a fun, like just thinking about it, right? Like, I mean, there's been a bunch of videos about, strapping a survey device on a Roomba, or I think even Peter McKenzie did one of those robot dogs, and then some of the, surveying with drones and stuff. And so that stuff's kind of interesting, but it's like, what else can those things do? And I know there's like the commercial aspect, and you got people walking around, so you don't necessarily want to like be whizzing drones by them. But one of the things I saw that I thought was kind of interesting was, if you have like a shift change or you have everybody off of your ASRS area. I saw a thing where like where it said BMW was using drones with RFID readers on them to go through and do inventory, and it said something like it reduced like several days of human involvement. It was able to be completed in one day. And then also, like LiDAR mapping and stuff like that. And it's not, that's not traditionally like a wireless communication technology, but I think that some of that stuff might be interesting too. I mean, obviously, right, you've got like thermal cameras and machine inspection and stuff like that, but
We know
I don't
something
know.
that you talk about a lot actually about not being able to survey within machine cells. And I think, conceivably that could be a use case if you're able to strap what you need to a drone, so that they could go just above the machine cell and at least get a lot closer than you normally could walking around it, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
well, there's different kinds of machine cells. So like a lot of times our stuff is like there's an AGV that's running through an area, or in entertainment, you don't necessarily have like ridership. Like you're not gonna strap a case onto onto a coaster or like a dark AGV and send it out with a person riding on it, holding on to their laptop. But I could definitely see where like maybe you need to like, I don't know about like class 1 to 2 areas, what the implications for that would be. But there definitely are like areas where it's kind of, it'd be daunting to get a person in there, or it wouldn't be possible to get them in there during production, that you might be able to fly a drone through that area and at least get kind of close to where the actual client antenna is going to travel.
I could see a use case for that in open pit mining, because
Mhm.
you don't want to be walking around there with all their trucks running around all the time. But you could, stand a distance away and zoom a drone through, and either, doing a survey, passive survey, or
Mhm.
even spectrum analysis at key area locations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and what you were just saying is like not standing in some of those areas with those giant like dump trucks and machines and stuff. And it
I've been to a,
reminded,
a site here in North Carolina where, their dump trucks running around. It's a phosphate mine and it's open pit, and half of their trucks that are running around are automated. There's no drivers in them,
Mhm.
so the last thing you want to do is be walking around with robot trucks, right? And taking that risk, but you got to get the survey done. So I could see a potential use case there.
Yeah,
Is
because
it fairly niche or niche, as it were? I believe so, but is it still a use case nonetheless? It is.
yeah. Well, I could definitely see, you're talking about some of that stuff, and a big concern of ours in OT is definitely like human safety. And even just with like regular drive around AGVs, they a lot of times they just have like a prox sensor or a or something like that. That if you trip it, then the AGV stops. But if you stand in the right spot, that thing does a sweeping turn, and then next thing you know, your foot's getting run over or something. And so like in the execution of your typical job, you you're usually like some level of cautious. But when we get in there and we're trying to like look at a signal and pay attention to that, whatever measurement device we're using, that kind of normal workflow where you would be kind of cautious of those devices, it's an added level of distraction. So I can definitely see that like adding an element of safety, because you know is it fun to wipe out a 10 or $20,000 drone? Probably not, but it's a whole lot it's a whole lot cheaper and a better outcome if that gets destroyed versus you getting run over.
Yeah, and you mentioned LiDAR mapping, and while that's not traditionally, in the realm of Wi-Fi slash standard wireless communications, I do see that a lot on all of the shows that I watch on TV about, ancient civilizations, and they do LiDAR scans of the jungle, and it's always some dude who's carried a drone backpack all the way out into the jungle and has no way to recharge it. But, they do some cool LiDAR scans, and you can magically see what 2,000-year-old village used to be there.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Hey, and if any customers out there are looking to have their lost civilization temple thing mapped out, I'd be happy to go do that if you want to pay for it.
Well, provided we find a crystal skull at the end, I'm all for it.
That yes, that would be nice.
So moving along, looks like Siemens has got some interesting things coming here.
Yeah, so well, so they're so their 5G, the specific term is eluding me right now, but basically like their 5G client is on the market and it's LTE backwards compatible. It's capable of supporting CBRS and private 5G. And then kind of the new twist is that so there are some public carriers, depending on which one you use, that they can work with, and some of them they're in the process of kind of finalizing certifications for that. So maybe next year it'll be kind of fully baked, ready to go on the public side, but that's a go right now. And then I think also, there's nothing concrete or announced yet, but I think that we're probably going to potentially see some Wi-Fi 7 stuff. And that's probably the theme for today, right? Is that like, we got the Wi-Fi 6 stuff, but the 7 stuff's coming. And so I'm looking forward to hearing any kind of news on that. So I'll keep peppering my friends in the industry. And then
Well, if
you,
anyone's got the chutzpah to start pushing out Wi-Fi 7 in an industrial AP, I would think it would be Siemens, right?
I think so, yeah. And but they're also, this is not meant as like a knock on them, but it's I mean, I think just kind of like OT in general, right? Like we talk about how they're, a couple of years, they kind of trail technologies by a couple of years, and so that gives it a chance for like, widespread industry adoption. The AP infrastructure side comes along, and then the clients kind of follow from that. So like, it is nice that the stuff is usually kind of pretty well worked through by the time we get it in our hands to deploy it, where you hope you don't have to sit there messing with it and figuring it out on the bleeding edge when you just implemented a multi-$100,000 solution in a plant.
Yeah, industry and manufacturing are not noted for being on the bleeding edge when it comes to a lot of different technologies because, like we were talking, we were pre-gaming, once you get something in and it works, how often do you touch it? You
Yeah,
typically only go back and touch it if it breaks or
you
if you're
only you
doing
only
specified preventive maintenance, right?
yeah, yeah, you only touch it when it's death by a thousand cuts time.
So the standard, site that I've been to in general seems to be about 10 years behind. That kind of is the de facto standard that everybody's running on, whether they intend to or not. I have been to very few places that keep everything upgraded to brand new stuff. And that holds true from wireless to standard network infrastructure running on switches that have been there for 15 years, have been end of life for 8 of it, end of support for 4 of it.
Hmm.
But because it's the if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality, they don't want to touch it.
Yeah, well, man, I've still got customers reaching out to find HP 501s to just replace, so that way they don't have to go through. They're not quite ready to go through the pain of mapping over a new client for their vehicles.
Yeah, that's pretty painful. I was talking to my guys at Phoenix Contact. They this year, this year they came out. They've got 2 different Wi-Fi 6 models on their industrial platform, and they're handy little APs. I got 2 of them here in my lab, so it's nice to see those because they fully utilize WPA3 as far as its security is concerned, and we all know what a huge jump that is in security. But from what Justin was telling me, that they're working on 6E models for hopefully release sometime in 2025. I imagine probably Q3, Q4. Don't hold me to that, but that's just my speculation. But that's actually pretty quick for an industrial radio manufacturer to be coming out with something 6E. When you figure how long has 6 been even ratified slash adopted? What, a year and a half, if that, maybe 2 years?
But it's been a couple of years. Well, no, what isn't it like 2020? It feels like it hadn't been that long, but
It definitely doesn't feel like it's been since 2020.
was it ratified? Is that the right word? 2019 was when it was
Are you serious? It got
was
ratified in
when this was when
2019?
this well was when the standard was released, and then it was ratified in 2020.
Wow. Okay then.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, I think that's just when you get our age. and yours
Yeah,
feels like
it's well,
a
you
week.
close your eyes, you time warp, and next thing you know, you're 85 and living with a bunch of cats. So, but still, it's encouraging to see industrial radios manufacturers coming out with or working on newer technology. And he wasn't able to swear to anything on the Wi-Fi 7 aspect, but he has just heard the talks, within engineering, but he obviously can't quote or anything, but they're still working on 6E,
Yeah. Yeah,
which
and
is
I think that's
that's a
common for a
big
lot of
jump for
people.
industrial hardware, especially when you consider how much Wi-Fi 4 is still very, very prevalent in the industrial sector on a metric crap ton of radios,
Hmm.
or it could be a standard crap ton of radios versus metric,
But
Um,
in these companies, I mean, I've talked about this before, but we've had a bunch of customers doing they've gotten the IT network refresh and with the what's the way to say it? With the dissemination of information being so easy now, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of really informed IT people, and so then we get pressed on us this laundry list of here's what needs to be supported. So like you're saying, the Phoenix contact supporting WPA3, the neighbor reports and all those kinds of things. Like some of that stuff is, we're kind of being required to have that no matter what now. And so it is nice that some of these clients are finally kind of coming around, because I know not the beginning of this year, but kind of the middle of last year was when I started getting requests for some of that stuff.
well, I mean, then you look at people like ProSoft Technologies, and we had Vic on not too long ago,
Mm-hmm.
and their primary radio is still a Wi-Fi 4 radio. They skip Wi-Fi 5 altogether. They're
Mm-hmm.
looking into Wi-Fi 6 technologies, but when they can get the incredibly low latency radio to radio handoffs that they're getting because they have that low level chip access, right? And so they may not support WPA3. However, on their latest versions of firmware for those radios, they do support management frame protection, and that's one of the keystones of WPA3, right? It's mandatory management frame protection, and then the advanced encryption, right? Well, it's not like there's anything wrong with the 256-bit encryption for WPA2, but when you add that management frame protection, that takes that security to a whole nother level.
Yep, and they got their radios out too. That ProLinks Edge, their Wi-Fi 6 radio. So they've got one of those out on the market now too.
Oh, so they did release it.
Hmm.
Okay.
I know that because I messaged Vic and he told me.
Oh. Oh man, it's good to have friends, right?
That is absolutely correct. But yeah, so they've got, they're starting to put stuff out. And I would be curious, I mean, to pick his brain a little bit and see, have they kind of brought parity to that chip access that they had before? Because I know in the Siemens stuff, they're the newer iteration of IPCF is not, it's not cross compatible with the older generation, and so it's that IPCF2, and so and for anybody listening, is their like industrial point coordination function. I hope I said that right. But it basically like allows a batch of PLCs or devices on the back end that need deterministic communication. It does like a time slicing and then does kind of a round robin with everybody, allows them to talk. And if there's time left in that whatever 32 or 64 millisecond cycle time, then additional clients can communicate on that. But what we lost is like now this in Siemens, they don't have like a second radio they don't have a client, or not a client. They don't have an access point that has a second radio in it. So what was really nice was their IPCF MC implementations, and so we're kind of losing that. So it's just interesting seeing kind of how these problems, like the new technologies, the new chipsets, create problems, and then how do the vendors respond to that and give you at least as close to the same feel with their product when it comes out for the newer stuff.
I'd be curious to see what Mox is doing. I haven't seen anything crazy from them as of late, but to be fair, I also haven't really gone digging. but that's another fairly prevalent industrial radio manufacturer.
Well, it looks like they've got some DIN rail mountable Wi-Fi 6 radios out. So they're in the game. And we use I mean, there's like a ton of our customers use their client at least their client radios as the the work group bridge or the client radio on their vehicles.
So what I'm interested in, for as we talk about some of this newer stuff, is what's going on with R3. We've got a couple of their main little mesh radios. Well, I've got a pair here in the lab that I'm slowly starting to dig into as I have time. But they just released, what is this Edge X? Have you dug into Edge X?
So I have done a little bit of looking into it, and so that's their it looks like it's like a managed 6E. They're calling it a managed 6E communication device, but basically it's like it's a piece of 802.11 hardware, and it also has, from what I can tell, it's got an M2 slot in it, and so there's grumblings, and I don't know where they are in the process of releasing it, but they're going to be able to give you an 802.11 device and then also kind of like side run, I'm guessing, to maybe some like IO or something like that on that echo ring, that token ring that they do. So that's pretty cool. And then one of the really interesting features is that they're able to put a soft PLC on board that device as well. So it seems like it's kind of a not a Swiss Army knife, but it's like a multi-use platform that they've put out. And so that's kind of cool because, in one device you get a PLC, potentially, you can offload some of your wireless IO to that Echo ring potentially. And then you also, you get the full, like the new 6E frequencies in something that's designed to be an industrial radio.
Yeah, I found their data sheet. I was curious to know what industrial protocols they're talking about. Is it like Profinet or Profibus
Yeah,
or
so it
Modbus?
says they can do like Profinet, and it's also interesting they've got MAC cloning on there. So I don't know if they can do natting, but that MAC cloning might still help because we still run into that the passive client
Right.
um, pops up as a problem from time to time.
Interesting. So interesting news on the R3 front. That's pretty cool.
And it looks like it's got a decent like temperature range too. So yeah, I mean, it's looking more and more attractive every time I see them.
I I've done some deployments with some Phoenix wireless IO, and it's in the 900 megahertz range. But and it's direct attached IO with mesh. But this has a completely much wider set of functionality. It looks like, as opposed to like dedicated wireless IO, be it Phoenix or Banner or whatever. That's interesting. Fortinet is coming on the scene, and it looks like they are producing some industrial geared hardware.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know that anything's announced yet, but I think that and it's probably all, it looks like some Wi-Fi 7 and some 5G capable devices. And that sounds like they're kind of geared, some of them are going to be geared towards industrial applications.
Now,
And
I've seen some of their general mount firewalls that have 5G uplink capabilities,
mhm.
and I don't know. I don't know if they're also capable of private 5G, but I know that they're at least cellular capable. And what the extent of that is, I'm not quite sure. But I imagine the amount of control, being that it's a 40 gate firewall, for God's sakes, that you can get over whatever traffic's hitting that thing is phenomenal.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's a good thing to keep in your back pocket because they're kind of more security focused. So some of these remotes, if you've got like remote monitoring stations and stuff like that, like
Well, I
I'm
mean, it's
excited.
their DNRel mount firewalls are not scaled back firewalls. They are full featured. So if you log into a like a standard rack mount like 100F 40 gate, and then you go and log into one of their industrial firewalls, it's not a scaled down version. It has all the exact same functionality, save maybe the redundancy, but they're fully capable of doing just ridiculous amounts of things. unlike a lot of dedicated industrial firewalls, which are usually like dedicated to, like if it's a Tofino, it's dedicated to some very specific protocol conversion,
Yeah, yeah,
or
just kind of like scaled back with like a
right.
select, like a
Or
select kind of routing
again,
set.
I hate to keep harping on Phoenix and turning this into the Phoenix show, but the Phoenix DNRL firewalls, the MGuard series are absolutely fantastic. You can go in there and you can set your nets and you can set some basic rules based off of port protocol, and you're done.
Yep.
And you can have them up and running inside of 5-10 minutes. It's nothing super crazy, very easy to go in and configure. However, they do not have all of the advanced functionality you would get out of something like a 40 gig.
Well, I mean, it's okay to prop up the good companies that we deal with. That's why household staples are household staples, is because they're predictable and reliable.
That's true. The CWNP Wireless IoT Track is the only certification program available that not only covers wireless IoT protocols in common use, but IoT as a technology and solution that is revolutionizing industry and business at the same time. When you work through the IoT track, you learn the protocols, the devices, the data, and the applications that bring the true value IoT has to offer. And for those with the tenacity to persevere, the world's elite IoT certification completes the process and the certified wireless IoT solutions expert credentials. If you want to be in the cutting edge of what's happening in technology, you won't find a better certification program for the Internet of Things. So what
So,
else we got here on our list
so let's
today?
see. Still, I think this is kind of interesting, and this is still in the Wi-Fi radio kind of world. Is that it's like Modus, and then I guess the company was acquired, or there's like a US instantiation. So it's a company called Onyx, and I've got one of their radios, and have been actually doing some troubleshooting at a site that has them as the client on the vehicles. And I think it's more of an infrastructure issue they're having. But they've got an AXE client, so they've got a 6E cable client already on the market. And those, you can get them at a number of different flavors. So if you need like an RS-232 or various like input connectors, they give you that ability. But something interesting that I did not see, and I think that you'll like this, is that they've got this device called a Data Eagle that can go into your control cabinet or your system. And so it's basically for like SIP safety or Profinet or some of those types of things where you need like a time sensitive communication, and those operate on 2.4 Bluetooth or 900 megahertz.
That's interesting. So is it a full-blown radio, or is it more like a sensor data package, or is it remote IO?
So it's a looks like it's like a DIN mountable device. Yeah, so like a stationary data collector.
You know
Yeah,
I'm
so
a
it's just like a little like compact like DIN rail mounted radio.
I'm a sucker for anything 900
And
megahertz.
so yeah, but so they've got like the IP20, like just the cabinet rated one, and then they've got an IP65 version too that's like -4 to 140F. So whichever units that is. I'd have to Google. But yeah, I mean it looks like it pulls like point 0.2 amps or like 200 milliamps kind of at a max conservation. Yeah, so that's I mean that thing looks pretty cool. It says Profinet, ProfiSafe, Ethernet IP, SIP, Open Safety, Profibus, ProfiSafe, CAN bus. So it's pretty much like what you would expect it to or what you would hope that it would support.
Well, if anybody from Onyx is listening, send us some lab gear. Let us check it out. This looks pretty cool.
Yep, I'll make a note and I'll reach out to my buddy.
So speaking of sub gigahertz, Meshtastic.
Oh yeah.
So you were telling me about this, and then it's if anybody wants to look it up, it's meshtastic.org.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's like a goof like fun hobbyist project or if it's got some like serious potential, but I was thinking about it, I was seeing some people, I mean it looks fun, you get little LoRa devices, and then you load up this node, and you can send like text-based information to people. And so you can kind of set up your own sort of like low power mesh infrastructure all around places. And I don't remember what the event was, but I saw there were some people that like were hosting nodes at one of these conferences. It might have been Cisco Live, and then people were, running around like talking to each other with their little mesh tastic devices. But it's basically, like you get like a little SBC that's got a LoRaWAN adapter, and then you can get an IP connection to like your phone or whatever device you want to use, and then use that kind of as your data backhaul. And I was, as we were like looking at interesting technologies or like things to kind of discuss, I was like, well, is this something that might be like, mining or like plant startups or something like that where there's not a ton of infrastructure, or like this that LoRa stuff, you can get it a signal pretty far on it. So if you're out kind of in the very back of a no cell coverage plant or some things like that, just allowing some sort of like communication where maybe some other stuff might not work, like walkie talkies or some of those things. So it looked like it was kind of a fun thing. So if you're listening and you're a mesh-tastic enthusiast, send us an email, Jeremy or Scott at industrialwifishop.com. I'd love to hear of potential uses or really anybody that's like gotten their hands dirty with it. I'd love to hear some more about it.
I could see multiple machine to machine communication use cases for that, especially if you're looking at things like wastewater and whatnot, where all of your pump houses and controls are all remote.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And there could be anywhere from a mile or two, so separating these things, and all of your necessary controls data and more specifically environmental data, because the government wants to know everything that's going on. That's all low data rates. It's not like it's huge mountains of data per transmission, right? And LoRa would be perfect for that. Would be a perfect communication protocol for that sort of layout.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
so
I
as
could
far
see
as
a
like the
lot of
mesh,
machine to machine communication applications for that.
so I would think though maybe if you were doing something like that with and since it's based off of LoRa, like if you could get a LoRa communication established between them, then it might make more sense to either use LoRa or use Halo. But if you did try to maybe implement something with Meshtastic, if it really is only, text-based communication, I don't see why you couldn't have your PLC or IPC or whatever it is, generate a text string, send it across, and then you've got something receiving it on the other end
And
that
that's
parses it
kind of
out.
more what I was thinking, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I
definitely
didn't
like,
know all the specific, you know, directives of the
but I
mesh
mean, it's
test.
definitely, I think that we talk a lot about 900 megahertz is crowded because of the frequency hopping and and it's only like a slim band and all these technologies, but I mean people are building stuff on there and really like as manufacturing or any of these kind of industries start jumping off of this stuff, then it kind of it's like, okay, well, it's an urban legend that it's just totally crowded and it's unusable when really like a lot of people have abandoned it, as kind of a primary thing. So then it kind of not frees it up, but it makes it a more viable option if you don't have any of that stuff in the area.
Yeah, 900 megahertz, man. It's 902 to 928. That's a narrow slice of signal, but it is by no means dead, that's for sure.
I mean, it's active enough that I felt compelled to order one of those Osmium 900 megahertz scanners. So I could do spectrum analysis on it. I mean, it's entertainment's looking at it as an option to put non-critical, like non-critical, non-safety stuff on there.
Yeah, I still
Um,
have a 900 megahertz Wi-Spy. I got a Wi-Spy 900, and so that allows me to use my Metageek channelizer in 900 meg, which is really really nice. It's a struggle trying to find a new adapter though, since they don't make them anymore.
Man, mine's duct taped together and just living on a prayer.
Mine's not far from that, but
Let's see.
there's a lot going on in 900 megahertz, and I mean you look at radio manufacturers like a Steam, they actually do it's not Halo, but they do full data over 900 megahertz.
Yeah, those are the Steam stuff.
Yeah, I deployed a pair of Esteem radios down in Florida at a mill, and I was punching through probably half a mile of scrub brush and oak, and I was getting 20, 25 megs solid throughput, very low
That's
retransmits, and fairly low latency. And it was
yeah,
enough to support, two computers, a printer, and some scanners for truck input processing.
brother. You could watch some Netflix over 25 megs. I
Yeah,
mean,
people,
that's
man, people don't remember back in the day, you got your first cable connection, it was 10 meg, and you were like, this blows away DSL.
that's funny. Well, kind of on that same one we were talking about, the Osseum. And so in I don't know if this is too soon to say this, but in Q1 we were kind of planning on getting those guys on from Osseum and talking about their merger where they acquired MetaGeek, talk to them about spectrum analysis, and then there there may be some potential new hardware. So we'll have to see on that. Maybe they'll have some announcements or something.
I'm super excited to talk to those guys. With their acquisition, I mean, they were already a powerhouse on their own, but with the acquisition of MetaGeek, that truly puts them into the category of Lord High Commanders of all things spectrum analysis for the
Hmm.
Wi-Fi universe, right?
Yeah, man, layer one guys getting some love.
I can't, and I'm a spec and junkie as it is, between all these little like SDRs that I've acquired and messing around with some of the other smaller, less expensive devices you can find online, trying to find all manner of different alternatives that make sense to keep in my bag to take with me and whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, that's kind of my secret little passion, and I hide all these little things from my wife so she doesn't know I'm spending money on them.
Yeah, I'm always like, I think my wife's asleep. She'll never know.
It's those I've had a few beers and it's one of those late night Amazon orders. And next thing I
Well,
know, I've got two SDRs and Yoda Chia Pet.
that's funny. Well, so I think too, we could possibly pull in. I bet he'd love to hop on and talk about Spec and too. I'm gonna butcher this guy's name, but it's like Ketel Hansen. He presented at WLPC Prague, and he's kind of like when I think about spectrum analysis, he's like the first person that pops up because it's like he's just I think he's like the Matrix man. He like sees it. So let's see. What else do we have? Wi-Fi 7.
Wi-Fi 7. Yeah, and this is kind of the crux of what I wanted to talk about today. As we look and Wi-Fi 7 APs are coming out, I'm assuming when did it get ratified? That was not long ago, was it? Anyway, we have all these
Yeah, so
Wi
that was 20. Yeah, that was like earlier this year.
So it just got ratified. It's Wi-Fi 7. Manufacturers like Ruckus has a Wi-Fi 7 AP out. Fortinet's got a Wi-Fi 7 AP out. Aruba, I believe, has some Wi-Fi 7 APs out. So all your big major enterprise players
Yeah, I think
are starting to
wasn't
break
Ruckus one of
out.
the first ones to put one out too?
Ruckus,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and it's a beast, man. That is a badass radio. But looking at it, and all of the features and whatnot that you're gaining from Wi-Fi 7. When you look at an industrial application in manufacturing and whatnot, what in here is really going to benefit that kind of deployment? Because we know in general, when you look at wireless communication in this realm, data throughput is not really the huge deal here because the data needs are actually very low. It's the latency needs, right? We don't need the 1.21 gigawatts worth of throughput, right? We want, a solid, I don't know, 10 meg of throughput.
that's
But
right. We just need to get 10 megs of throughput going 88 miles an hour, and then we got it.
absolutely. And then it's the latency, right? It's we need that low latency, especially when we're involving controls traffic. And like you were talking about earlier, when you're talking about your controls traffic and in the cycles that it runs on, right? 32 millisecond, 64 millisecond cycles or whatever. Are these Wi-Fi 7 APs going to be able to handle that kind of low latency with clients that are not necessarily of the same manufacturer as the APs? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
So if you have AGVs running around and they require, I don't know, off the top of my head, let's just say a 20 millisecond, transfer time from AP to AP when roaming. Are they going to be able to support that with an AP that is not of the same manufacturer?
Well, it's a standard, right? It's supposed to just work.
Well, I mean, it's
We'll see. I mean, it's gonna be that X. I'm seeing here in your note the massive, all caps, massive channel widths.
well, yeah, I mean,
Uh,
you can sit here and you do these insane channel widths, right?
that's the thing.
320 megahertz, non-contiguous, right? That's a huge deal, right? You're cramming it all through with 4096 QAM for God's sakes.
Mhm.
You're crushing sheer volumes of data. Now, theoretically the data cap on that is like 40 some odd gig theoretical throughput. I mean, we all know realistically you're never going to see that unless you're in a greenfield environment in a soundproof room with absolutely no interference anywhere in the known universe at that space, right?
I
But
just, I
still, I mean,
just,
you're looking at conceivably a repeatable 10 to 20 gig worth of throughput, right? Straight up, just all of a sudden we have all this channel space now, and now you're eating it up with one 320 megahertz channel.
yeah,
You
I'm
know,
just hoping that the CWNEs and the gurus that are talking to these marketing departments are able to talk some sense into them, and they get the spray bottle out, and they spray them and say no, and these things come out with like a reasonable channel width as like a default because this
their
stuff,
default's going to be 80 megahertz wide channels.
well, I mean, it might be 320. I mean, that's just, that kind of stuff where it's like, we don't need that, you're on the phone with people all the time. And it's like, well, we have them set at 40 megahertz wide all over. And it's like, do you need that? Like, what does a 40 megahertz channel get you with a barcode scanner?
Right. Well, and that just goes right back to my argument of throughput.
I
Um,
do, I do think that that MLO, the multi-link operation, is where it kind of has those smarts in it to kind of say, hey, this is it's kind of like dynamic antenna selection in some of the models that you see. And it gives you the ability to possibly like what's the best link to transmit out of, or like what's the best frequency. I think that's going to be nice because it's going to help offer you some redundancy where you don't necessarily have to have a second piece of hardware or utilize a second radio. Well, you might still have to utilize a second radio, but you're not necessarily having to put in like an explicitly parallel link for that redundant connection. You've got kind of multiple ways to get your traffic across.
I see MLO being a benefit in high interference areas and being able
Mm-hmm.
to mitigate machine generated interference, and be able to dance around, especially in 2.4, because I see more machine interference and that frequency, from unshielded VFDs to various other just machinery in general creates a lot of interference in 2.4.
Yeah,
And
and
I'm starting to see it, on occasion or more than one occasion at 5 gigahertz, but being able to bounce across all three bands in order to get your transmission through reliably, that's that could be a game changer.
yeah, and I think too, like Wi-Fi cameras are probably going to be the thing that we see these really get adopted the most. My feeling is like in plant wide, I think that Wi-Fi 7 is going to help with those a lot, and that's probably going to be the first place that we see them deployed a lot.
I can see that. So Wi-Fi 7 does claim dramatically lower overall latency. I don't really have the means to test that, but that's the key, right? So if if their claims prove out to be true, then that ultra low latency, that also will add quite a bit into the ability to start cutting cords at a lot of places and really saving a lot of money.
Yeah. And they say, and two, they say that it's the connections are supposed to be more robust too. So, you have a you have like an active data link between, client and access point. And so that's going to be able to maintain, allegedly that's going to be able to maintain better with Wi-Fi 7.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, especially with the fact that, all right, so going back and looking at it, so Wi-Fi 6 has been ratified for 4 years now, and we're just now starting to see Wi-Fi 6 APs, industrial APs, and then in the works are 6E APs as far as industrial builds, right? So I
Mhm.
wonder how long it's going to take before industrial radios start coming in a Wi-Fi 7 flavor, a true industrial radio, DIN rail mount in the box for something for out in the field, not just a Cisco radio slapped in a hardened shell. I'm talking
Yeah.
dedicated industrial radio for machine and machine communication, as opposed to just general Wi-Fi access in a not so nice physical area.
Yeah. And I think too, it might also be a situation like, how ProSoft skipped Wi-Fi 5 pretty much altogether. This might be, Wi-Fi 7 might make more sense for a supplier to say, hey,
Let's just skip 6 and go right to
well,
7.
yeah, like these capabilities are actually like better suited to, and I know somebody that we should pull on to talk about this because they seem pretty passionate about it, but they seem to be kind of more geared towards that solid, sustained communication that you get that opportunity to have kind of like built-in redundancy capabilities. So it seems like it makes sense to you know Wi-Fi 6 is great, but possibly even just skip that and just kind of go into something that's more geared towards our industry.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that's going to all end up playing out. So you've got some notes here about some Wyland Pi action. What you got?
Yeah, so the WLAN Pi, the my favorite orange device. So I think there's some kind of exciting stuff because they've got, apparently there's now there's an app and they've got an API, so you're going to be able to kind of, I'm guessing, do a little bit of like programming for like custom needs and stuff for that. Which is that device intended for that? Can you, I don't know, legally deploy that long term in a site? I don't know if that's possible. There's, I mean, obviously you could do it and then ask forgiveness later, but at least it's like kind of a measurement tool and stuff. That's looking pretty positive. And then they announced they've got the M4 device that was able to accept PoE, but now they've got a way where you can get that OTG connection to it. So you can just USB-C into it, plug it into your laptop, and it can draw power and you can communicate data across it, which is very nice for when you want to play around with it in your backpack or take it out and then you don't have to get your Ethernet because nothing has an Ethernet port. Well, so maybe some Windows devices do, but I live in Mac world with all the good people. That's rude. No, but I mean, like you don't have to get out an Ethernet cable and you don't have to get out a charge cable and you don't have to get out your Ethernet adapter. It's just one cable into the device, one cable into your computer. So I'm really kind of excited for that because that's gonna increase the capabilities of that. And then they also just announced another device called the WLAN Pi Go, and so that's got like a mag mount, and it's kind of more intended for attaching it to your phone, doing a quick connection to it. So even if you don't have like your full on, your computer in your bag or whatever, right? Like you just take, you can put it in your fanny pack with your Spectrum analyzer
Yes,
and
fanny
plug
pack.
that in. Yeah. But I mean, I think that's probably going to open up the possibility for like doing like Wi-Fi halo surveying. And so, well, this not explicitly, but I think that the WLAN Pi is going to open up being able to do like halo surveying. And then our buddy Mark, he's got some stuff on 5G surveys too. So I'm thankful he's doing all the hard work there. Just going to allow me to do the easy work of just walking around and clicking the buttons.
Well, I'm
But yeah,
sure
so
he's got plenty of gear in his trusty fanny pack.
but yeah, so that's, I mean, that's, it's just a couple of products announced. And And then what, when I was watching the video on it, just to kind of refresh, there's a little bit of talk about there's a new shade of gray that they're using on the case. So that's if you care about that.
Wow.
I want
So
one. I want one in like neon, like glow in the dark filament printed, so that way it's like when the lights are out, it looks cool.
I can see that. So before we wrap it up today, there is, because this is December of 2024, there is a lot coming in 2025, and I just wanted to touch on a few things. So WLPC 2025, our buddy Mark Houts, he will be presenting at Phoenix. What's he talking about?
So he's got a presentation on surveying private cellular, and I think he's using the WLAN pipe for that. That's I stupidly didn't write that down, but that means heat maps, PCAPs, all kinds of stuff. So that's going to be pretty cool. And I know he's also got some. He's been doing some work on the Halo surveying side of that.
I would love to see some Halo surveys.
And then I don't know if he's doing a boot camp, but I think he is for sure doing a deep dive on it because I'm pretty sure that's the one I'm going to sign up for.
Well, if you're
And then
interested in any of Mark's stuff, you can go to markhouts.com and check out his blog and all his research that he posts up there. It's some good stuff. He is actually nominated this year for the Wi-Fi Awards. So if you see him, make sure you vote for him.
and that's in case you don't know how to spell Houtz, his website's Mark with a K, MARK, Houtz, HOUTZ.com.
So he's not going to be the only one presenting this year at WLPC. You, sir, have a 10 talk. You have been voted in. The people have spoken. They want to hear from the mighty Jeremy. What you going to be talking about?
So I'm going to be talking about some of the stuff we've talked about before on here, but I'm I'm going to be presenting on doing RF surveys in non-traditional. So I said RF surveys in non-traditional environments. So that's machine cell. So if it's strapping a device onto an EMS carrier or an AGV and then having it run through a machine cell that you can't physically access. Things like also like entertainment. So like how we will do surveys for something like a roller coaster or something like that. So there's some kind of wild stuff in there, or at least I think it's kind of wild. But yeah, places you can't necessarily physically access, but how do you creatively like get data out of there from your actual where you're into as close to where your client radio is going to be from that perspective.
Well, that's going to be awesome. I
Yep.
just
And
know
so if you voted for me, thank you so much.
it.
It's very flattering.
So we also have some YCO dates coming up in 2025. See, May 14th, there will be a YCO event in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, practically my backyard. That's just a couple hours up the road. I will be presenting at this one. I'm not sure what yet. And I don't know if I'm going to do a presentation or if I'm going to do a hands-on lab like last time, but I'm really looking forward to it. The last one was a lot of fun. And from talking with Dawn, who is organizing this particular one, she said there's a lot more people in the queue. They haven't put it up on the Wyco website yet, but I imagine it should be there soon. So, guys, whether you're OT or whether you're a wireless guy, check out the Wyco event that's coming in May of next year in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then another one will be at the end of May, May 29th in Nashville, Tennessee. And it looks like, Jeremy, you're going to be hanging out for that one, huh?
Yeah, I'm gonna try and make it out to that. Our buddy Allie asked me if I could go. So my daughter's birthday is the day before, so I'm gonna wake up really early and drive to Nashville on the 29th. And then I'm not 100% on this, but I'm gonna volunteer to do like a presentation on Curb and kind of some of the wireless visualization stuff that we do as a company, like a product that we developed. Not me, but other people in my company.
That's right. You guys actually developed your own software specifically and for
To
surveying
yeah,
curb, right?
yeah, yeah, for parsing the telemetry, and it's not totally I mean, it's helpful as a commissioning tool for like surveying it. So there used to be, when it was fluid mesh, they had a little piece of software called Fluid Stats where it'd bring in the telemetry data and then just give you kind of a side scrolling view of, what the RSSI is, what the SNR is, packet error rate, link error rate, some of those things, what's the active connection. And then it was really fun having to, initially we'd have to send the PCAPs off to the fluid mesh guys, and then they'd run a script on it. And then you get these really like incredibly busy, just kind of like line graphs there. And you'd have to kind of go through in your mind through kind of a time series of, okay, we started this test at this point. We started running the vehicle at about 30 seconds. This is where the vehicle's in this handover, or like a track exchange or something like that. And so then you'd have to kind of tune your power like that, rerun it, and then see how it looks. So we developed um sort of a almost like a mimic of that, but then also like some radio management features and stuff like that, but basically kind of like a network health visualization piece of software for it. So that's actually like really cool. And so in that 10 talk, I'm going to show kind of an event that we have where we're working on like an autonomous vehicle race. And we actually like caught a spin. So taking the information from the vehicle, like positioning and all that, we actually captured like a spin out of one of these cars. And so it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Well, at least I think it is. Yeah.
Well, that's going to be an awesome talk. Lastly, but definitely not least, what we have got coming up in store for all 15 of our listeners for next year is pretty awesome. So what's coming up for the industrial Wi-Fi shop in 2025? Well, we've already have some great guests lined up for first quarter or so. We talked about them earlier, Awesome, the Lord Hyde commanders of all things spectrum analysis for the Wi-Fi universe. They have agreed to come on the show for good or ill. Hopefully, it'll be all good and not ill. Um,
And real quick, Scott, I do it's good to give positive praise where you can. I got a call from Brian at Ossium yesterday because I ordered that 900 megahertz analyzer. And then I also ordered an antenna, like an interference detecting antenna. And they weren't necessarily, they're obviously not meant for the same device, but they called me to confirm that yes, do I actually want both of these items because they're not compatible? To which I said, well, I've got the 245 and 6 gigahertz clarity, so I'm going to use this for that purpose. Um, those guys are great to work with. So I want to give them a shout out. That was they didn't know it was me, but they called me.
well, I'm excited to get him on the show. That's going to be a fun conversation. I don't know if you guys know or not, but I am part of the NIST IEEE Joint Industrial Wireless Working Group. I've been a part of it for going on 2 years now, and I make the meetings whenever I can around work. And the joint working group is doing a lot of great things involving testing for industrial radios and interferers and classifications of things in order to help industrial wireless move along in a proper fashion. Dr. Rick Candell is who chairs that. And he has agreed to be on the show, and I can't wait to get him on here and talk about what the NIST IEEE group is doing to help support wireless in these environments and just the industry in general. It's an interesting group, and I have a lot of fun with it, and I have learned a lot. So that ought to be good. Recently got an email from Dr. Emmett Brown. He did agree to discuss the 1.21 gigawatt power thresholds. So that'll be an interesting conversation. And the gang from industrial wireless manufacturers Phoenix Contact will be joining us again at some point in either Q1 or Q2. And I can't wait to get those guys on and talk about all of their innovations and what they're doing in the current airspace of what is industrial wireless. And then January, this is a pretty big deal. January of 2025 is the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop's 1 year anniversary. We've made it. We're less than a month away of being a year old. It's I'm pretty excited. I could not imagine how far this has come in a year, and then I've been able to make it a year, and with Jeremy coming on board, and it's just been awesome. And I'll be doing a new CWNP giveaway to celebrate the 1 year anniversary. So stay tuned to that. I'll let everybody know in our first episode in January in what will be season 2 of the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop.
And
Anything else to add there, Jeremy?
yeah, so I didn't put it on the list, but I've also spoken with, I think we're going to be able to get some people from R3 on at some point in time. I've got some people from Fortinet. I've got some people from Siemens hoping to pull them in. And I think definitely, especially given where we started the show, we need to hammer down and get some curb people on.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and you know what? You're absolutely right with R3. Been talking to them just in general, and I don't think it's going to be hard to get them on the show. They're a
Mhm.
good group of guys, and they've got a lot of interesting things coming up. So that'll be an interesting show. Well, thanks everybody. We appreciate you listening. This is Scott, and that's Jeremy over there, and we really appreciate you guys. And we'll talk to you next year. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we hope you join us on our next episode of the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop.